Welcome to the Team Teach podcast. I'm Clare, and in each episode you'll find me talking with an expert guest to learn more about behaviour. We squeeze a lot into each episode. You'll listen to the latest thinking in behaviour, continue your professional development with our book recommendation, and then I'll send you away with 3 practical tips you can use in your setting. I'm joined today by Dave Smallwood. Dave is a Principal Team Teach trainer and Company Director of SENse Training and Consultancy. He's worked in special schools for both the local authority and for the National Autistic Society. As a staff development coordinator for the National Autistic Society, he's also delivered and developed training in autism, equality, diversity and rights. Dave is also an occasional co-host of the Team Teach podcast. And today, Dave and I are talking about reacting versus responding. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Claire. How are you? You all right?
I am very well. I'm very excited about the topic we're talking about today, which is reacting versus responding. I know we train quite often together, Team Teach courses and various other courses as well. And that it comes up quite a lot, I think, as a theme throughout our courses. So it's interesting to kind of dissect it a bit together, I think, today. But I wanted to start off, Dave, with thinking about a bit of a reflective question. And it's what you wish you knew then that you know now about the topic.
I knew then and what I know now. I think as a practitioner, when I first started working, especially when I started working within the field of autism, working with individuals with a diagnosis of autism, I often used to get asked by people, or told, actually is probably a better phrase, told by people that I must have the patience of a saint. That's what people used to say. And I didn't really understand that at the time, because I didn't ever lose my temper, but I mean, I am like a human being, or I am a human being. And I do have a temper just like everyone else. But when I was at work, I very seldom did. And I think I knew then what I know now. I just didn't consciously know it. And I think what it is, it's about responding to what people are saying through the behaviour, or what people are feeling, and the reasons and the drivers for behaviours, what was producing behaviours. That's what I was responding to, and I know that now. And I think in everyday life, if something, say, happened whilst I was driving my car or in the street, then I'd be more likely to feel angry at somebody that's behaved in a certain way. But that's me reacting to a behaviour that I see, and it's me reacting to a behaviour at face value. Whereas somewhere inside me subconsciously, when I first started out, I understood that actually these behaviours aren't intended to upset me and to hurt me. They're there to communicate a need or communicate something from that individual. So that's my answer for you there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So almost an innate way of being able to switch on empathy, which perhaps I think when we're early on in our careers, we may not have a name for it, or we may not have a theory or something evidence-based that's behind it. But sometimes we have practitioners that just have that innate ability to empathise with the individuals that we support.
Probably, yeah, I think so. I think it's, I don't know if innate's the right word or not, or just the setting that I worked at the time. I think the ethos and culture of the setting was so fantastic that we just all understood from day one. And I think that came through and seeped through the culture of the whole establishment. I think that's lacking sometimes, and it becomes a culture of us and them, and we react to behaviours at face value. And I think when you're working in special needs, special schools, that culture is very different. But it's certainly an ethos and culture that I'm starting to see running through all types of settings and all in all education. And there's a big shift happening. So hopefully, although we will base it in research and we will base it in theory, it will start becoming that innateness.
That's definitely a word, innateness. That is now. That's a Dave Smallwood innateness, new word.
With the pause in the middle.
With the pause in the middle. Yeah. Yes. No, it's really interesting, because I picked up on in innateness, and you're absolutely right that we can have all of the empathy, understanding, care in the world to help us respond appropriately. But if there isn't really the right culture, ethos, and set of values in a service, we can kind of lose maybe some of that innate ability to empathise. It kind of gets caught up perhaps in poor practice across service, sort of negative staff viewpoints. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I really firmly believe that, because we do a lot of training, both you and myself, a lot of training together. But certainly the success that I see in services is when it's a whole setting culture, not just set out in policy to tell staff how they should be interacting with the individuals that they support, but actually that modelling of behaviour and cascading through the whole service. That's where success really happens. And I see the stumbling blocks and the least successful services are the ones where it doesn't cascade all the way through. There's only some individuals that are doing it. It's like it's an analogy I often use is we've got children in a river, and we do everything we can to rescue the children from the river. And we jump in and we try and get them out, stop them from drowning. But why are we doing all that? Why are we not at the other end, stopping them from falling in the first place? And that to me is an example of which would be an inclusion department in a school, which are fantastic. And you often find that the ethos and culture within that department is brilliant, and they support the individuals so well. But if that culture doesn't run through the whole setting, that the children are falling in the river in the classroom because of the understanding and empathy of the members of staff in there probably doesn't match that of the people in the inclusions department. So what happens is it all falls apart there. And then the inclusion department would have to pick up the pieces afterwards. If you can get that running through, and that comes down to a lot of culture and ethos, yes, but planning as well, and good planning. And if we get that right throughout the whole setting, then we won't have the children falling in rivers anymore, or not as much anyway.
Yeah, it's quite a dramatic metaphor that you created with that one, but it creates a nice image. But I was also thinking that departments, or even it might just be staff members working in isolation with that responsive approach, are almost like cogs, and cogs, to be successful, to motor an engine, have to work together, don't they? They have to turn together. But what I'm kind of seeing with the example that you use of the inclusion service is that they're often, or sometimes, turning completely in isolation. But we need all of the cogs to turn together to support the individuals that we work with.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was just an example. I don't want to paint a bad picture of any type of service in particular. It was just an example. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That is kind of what I see on a day-to-day basis is individuals with such a lovely, passionate approach. And they're full of empathy, and they're thinking about responses to situations really, really well. But the other cogs in the wheel aren't. It's not that they're just not turning with them. It's actually that they're resisting against them, and it starts pulling them back the other way. So you're right. I think it does need to all work as a well-oiled machine, isn't it?
God, we're good at our metaphors today, Dave. They're slightly mixed.
Yeah.
We've had drowning children and cogs in an engine, but hopefully listeners, if they're able to picture things, are picturing kind of the right images that we're coming up with. Did you know that Team Teach also offers a coaching and consultancy service? It's an effective way to build positive cultures. Let's work together to map out a strategic plan tailored around your needs, support your staff with coaching sessions from our experienced team, and help you create, change and improve professional practice throughout your organisation. Visit the Team Teach website to find out more. But I was also thinking about that responsive approach, and related to what we've just said is that some of the work I do with individuals at the moment doing intervention work is based in a service, and I work one-to-one. I do loads of bits around confidence, bit touching on mental health, but also confidence in learning, confidence, their own ability, self-esteem. And if I work in isolation, it's so responsive, that intervention. But if I work in isolation, the evidence that I gather from staff, from the individuals, you can barely see much impact. When you're working one-to-one, alone in a room, you'll get a bit of impact. But where we see the most impact with those kind of interventions is where I'm able to work with the individual, work with staff, work with individuals across the service that work, with the individual that I'm supporting. And then we start to see a big shift. And it's that working together, isn't it, on responsiveness, because we just can't do it in isolation. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work in isolation. No, it has to be everybody. Consistency. That's what they say, isn't it? And, consistency. That's debatable as well. If we can all be consistent, I think we should be consistent where we can, and that's what it is, isn't it? It's coaching staff and everybody working. It's kind of working on our responses before something's happened, isn't it? Because sometimes in the moment it's hard to think about responses, and then that comes down to planning, working together, coaching, cascading. But we're thinking about those managed, thought out responses to situations before it actually happens. And I had another point and it's gone.
Oh, that always happens, Dave. Let me ask you a question and then it might come back a bit later. Because I was thinking, we've talked about a little bit about responsiveness and cohesive of teams, consistency. Is there a place for reactivity though, or being reactive to behaviour in situations?
It's a good question, that is, because it's a debate I had not long ago on a course, actually. And it's surrounded, and this is a bit of an emotive point, spitting. And a member of staff on a course argued that there is actually a place for being reactive, because spitting is disgusting and we do react to it. So absolutely, if someone spits at me, this is what was said, if someone spits at me, I will turn around and say, that's disgusting, I'm not happy, you've hurt my feelings. Now I'd argue that if we're reacting naturally, that could possibly make the situation worse, depending on the function of the behaviour, why they're spitting in the first place. If they're looking for a reaction and they want you to be disgusted, then all that's going to happen is that's going to follow through and carry on. But if you've built up such a relationship and it's out of the norm, then that type of reaction could actually improve the situation, because children need to know when, or individuals need to know when you've hurt somebody's feelings, and actually it's not very nice. And I think that's true. And that got me really thinking. But then I was also thinking that could still be a response, because I think a response, the difference between a reaction and a response is the response is a little bit more thought out and well managed, and we're thinking about what it is we want them to learn and what we want them to understand about the situation. So even though that seems like a reaction, it is actually a well thought out response. So I think sometimes a response can be made up to look like a reaction. But if we're just reacting on natural instincts, we've got to be very careful.
Yeah, because you can flip, can't you, when you're reacting to quite an emotive part of yourself, and that's not necessarily wrong, but demonstrating pure anger with the individuals that we work with is not going to be a helpful response, because we might start to get a little bit out of control of ourselves, I think, in those moments. So I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because essentially you're saying that there's quite a grey line between reacting and responding, and sometimes we can dress up responding as looking like a reaction. I'm thinking about someone that I've worked with, and I did literally what you said, that I responded but made it look like a reaction, because they needed to know that what they'd done had frightened me a little bit and concerned me. But if I'd said that in a really authentic way with that emotion, I think it might have been too much for that individual. So I just had to make sure that it was a bit more responsive, but had the core message that had been frightened and concerned by how they had just behaved. And that was received okay. And it was a helpful conversation, but I think I had to be very measured. So yeah, it's really interesting that you've said that, the grey line, or dressing up responsivity as a reaction.
Yeah, and it's quite a skill, I think. One I don't know if I've ever fully honed, but it is a skill, isn't it?
Well, I don't think we've honed all the skills yet, Dave, have we?
No, but I think you're right. I think we've got to be like really, really careful about loss of control ourselves, and we are the deciding factor in that moment. That behavior is happening, whether we like it or not. It's happening right there, right in front of us, as we see it. And we have a choice, and we can react to that situation, or we can respond to it in a well thought out way. And what is the outcome we want? If we want to get caught in some kind of conflict with an individual, then a reaction will probably do it every time. A response, actually, if I think about, we'll talk about top tips in a little while, and this is something I've thought about, is our response actually, what are my instincts telling me to do right now? I'm going to try the absolute opposite of that, but because I'll probably get the complete opposite response from that individual. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to work every single time, but if my response is to shout at somebody, then I might just lower my tone and be very quiet and start whispering, and that's gonna provoke a different response from the other individual, I would think.
I think because I think almost what you're describing is that playfulness, and we're talking about like different approaches, and I don't mean playfulness that we're trying to make necessarily the individual laugh, but it's like non-judgmental, isn't it? I'm playing with a few responses and I'm checking and curious about how that's being received, and so I'm quite fully conscious of what I'm doing, because I think sometimes as practitioners we can be so hard on ourselves that we try a response and then it's all like, oh, that didn't work, like, this is all on me, I've caused that behavior, I've done this. But I think it's just trying to ensure that we are a bit playful, curious with it, because otherwise it can be pretty self-destroying if some of the responses that we try or the planning aren't successful, and we can be really hard on ourselves.
Absolutely, yeah. I really like that playfulness and curiosity. That's a lovely way to put it, because that's what we're doing, isn't it? It really is. And yeah, we all want to be wonderful reflective practitioners, but with that comes things playing over in our heads over and over again. I certainly think about things that happened 15 years ago. And did I do the right thing? Could I have done something differently? Should I have done something differently? Did my actions lead to that? And it does play on your mind over and over again. And I think that is why we should be playful and curious with our responses. We're not going to get it right every time. Absolutely not. And we should never kid ourselves into believing that we will. So we need to always be thinking about, well, am I responding the right way? That didn't work quite right. Let me try something different. And we'll find something eventually that works quite well. And then we'll try it one day and then it just won't work again. So we're always doing it. We're always doing it.
Always going back to I always call it on my courses, the metaphorical toolbox. I'm never sure if that's a great metaphor or not, but we're always having a rummaging and trying to find the next thing that might work, and trying to practice those things and adding to the toolbox where we can.
Maybe it's not a toolbox, maybe it's a box of arts and crafts. So we go back to our sticky glue and our sellotape and lollipop sticks, and we start building stuff and making new things.
Because we've been playful, right?
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah,
they're not set in stone. They're not already forged hammer. It's something completely new every time.
Yeah, because I also don't know how to use a drill, so that should be helpful.
We're back to the metaphors.
We've used too many. I'm just like, oh my gosh, they're all so mixed. Maybe we're using the toolkit to make the engine. I don't know. But anyway, I need to just draw us to a close just so we can do 3 tips at the end.
Do you want my 3 tips now? Yeah.
I'd love your 3 tips now, David.
Just all in one go?
All in one go. Get them out.
My first one is take a breath. Give yourself that millisecond to think about what we're going to say next or do next. And I think that little bit of time's one of them things. Time is a precious thing to all of us, and no one's got enough of it, and no one likes to give it away for free. But give ourselves that little bit of time to think, because we're going to get a different outcome if we give ourselves time to think. If we just react immediately, then it's probably not going to be the outcome we want. Look past the behaviour and try and see or listen to what the individual is trying to say to us. I think that's really important. They're not behaving necessarily in a way that's designed to hurt us, upset us, offend us in any way. Maybe it is by design, but behind all of that, they've got a need. And maybe it's not an individual calling us names. Maybe it's just an individual that's crying out for help. So try and look past the behaviour and just have a think about what that behaviour is trying to tell us, and try and respond to that rather than the behaviour that we see. And then my last one is about self-control, really. We often want to change the individual there and then in the moment, but we don't have control over that. Somebody is going to behave the way they are behaving, and in that moment, there and then, the only person that can change is me. So if I can change what I do, then maybe I can get a different outcome. And that's kind of combined with that what I was saying before. A way to change me is. Actually, this is what my reaction is telling me to do right now. So my response is going to be the complete opposite. And that's just a little tiny tip. It might not work, but it's well worth a try.
Brilliant tips there, Dave. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Claire. I really enjoy these.
You've been listening to the Team Teach podcast. It's been great to have you here with us as we discuss behaviour, communication, and the ways we can best support those in our care. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.